All right, it is May 28th, and Sam's sports news. Yesterday, he decided he was into birds and not sports anymore after the Avs watch. He tried birds and it was boring. Whoever wins the East, Montreal or Carolina, is going to be in a similar situation as with Colorado. Vegas is predicted to win the cup. I don't know if that's actually the line, but that's what Sam says is correct. And the Thunder will close it. We've kind of got a double header today in terms of topics. And before we get to that, our sponsor and our merch is that one mall that no one goes to anymore, the Dying Mall. And you probably don't have any malls in your area that are not dying and are also all existing as money laundering fronts. So the two topics that we're looking at are gas prices and energy crisis, and then DeepSeek 4. So if you're looking for gas prices, then that's what we're starting with. And if you're looking for AI news on DeepSeek and how it kind of works, then we'll go to that also second. Timestamps will be in the description. So the Strait of Hormuz, I'm working for bullet points here, has been closed effectively since March 26th, and during that time removed roughly 20% of petroleum and a large amount of liquid natural gas. So global 90-day immediate horizon stuff. So waterborne transit supplies or oil on the water stuff that is moving over ships have pretty much completely finished delivering. So import nations like Japan's 90% reliant on Middle East oil. However, they hold a very large strategic stockpile, which is something to it's pretty important as we go forward in talking about this. So the stockpile that you have of oil in case some emergency or you need to feed it into the economy, which is something the United States is doing pretty heavily right now. And it's one of the things that is helping to keep gas prices lower. And not just in America, we're essentially helping it stay lower across the world by having added supply. And some other countries are doing that as well. It's not just us trying to take the brunt of lowering the price. However, it is important to understand that that plays into the global price. So some of these places, particularly Australia, in terms of like countries that we in the United States tend to think of and care about, right? They're looking at about a 40 to 60 day time frame before they are on fuel rationing and worried about their reserves. So with the United States, one big advantage we have is one, we have crude stock to kind of suppress those prices. Our Strategic Petroleum Reserves (SPR) hits a floor at about 200 million barrels. So the amount that we have, if we were really just looking at using that supply reserve SPR, is about 15 to 20 weeks before fuel prices start to increase because we just don't have enough to strategically pull out of that reserve. That reserve, one, you can't go to zero on it just because of some technical things. I don't really know how storage for gas works or oil in general. And then the other piece being that if you stop pumping that into the economy, well, the other piece being that the it's strategic, right? It's held in reserve for certain things like a war. So talking about the U.S. supply product uh, problem. So one thing that comes up, and someone said to me, like, "Hey, why is this a problem for us? We can produce so much oil, and that we produce enough oil for us here in the United States." And the big problem there is that what we produce in the United States is what we would call light and sweet oil. So as Americans, of course, we had to make it sugary and sweet, but essentially that means that there's a low sulfur content and it comes pretty easily from like our fracking processes, as far as I understand so far. So our refinery infrastructure in the Gulf Coast is optimized to handle heavy foreign crude oil. Our pure domestic sweet stuff would leave a lot of stuff sitting idle, and it takes a couple months, as I understand it, to kind of transfer over your ability to um, use the sweet stuff. Now, for us, we have a nice situation where over 70% of our imports are insulated from the Middle East because we get them from continuous pipelines like Canada. We get about 60% of our oil in transit that is a continuous flow over a pipeline. And we get 2 to 5 day kind of weekly transits from the Gulf of Mexico area, wherever that's coming from. So Let's see. Status versus five line baselines, current net weekly draw. So, commercial crude storage. We have currently about 500 million barrels. Our strategic reserve, effectively, we have about 150 million barrels. And gas, as it is, we have about 200 barrels. And all of these are about 5% below average, except for the SPR, which is significantly lower. Now we're drawing almost 20 billion or 20 million barrels a day, which again, you're looking at 1,000 barrels divided by 20, and you start to get into this time limit that you're looking at. And one important thing to understand about the United States is we're not likely to just straight up run out of oil. We're more likely to run out of money and the desire to purchase it from a personal standpoint, right? Like, so what's the amount dollar per gallon that you are willing to say, okay, I'm going to still do this thing, or I'm going to not do this thing, or I'm going to take public transportation, or I'm going to take the bus. So in 2007, we hit pretty much the highest point of gas in America. So 2008, I think, somewhere in there. So we hit a price of about $4.11 per gallon nationally. So adjust that for inflation, and that's about $6.30 today. So our national average right now is somewhere around 420 to 460 for a gallon of gas. Now, here's the thing that matters in my mind the most is how much work do you need to do for a gallon of gasoline? So let's say you make the average median income in, I think it's like in California, it's like 45K. All right. So looking at a lower income level, right? Like, so let's say you're looking at a baseline of 16 to $18 per hour. Well, what that takes then in gas is you're working 30 minutes to an hour for a gallon of gas if it goes into that $7 to $12 range, which is, I think, not unlikely. So let's say we get to an average national of about $7, then a lot of the fallout comes around at how much cost per hour for your work does a gallon cost, right? Because you could be making $300,000 a year, and increasing the price 20% still doesn't increase the time it takes you to earn a gallon of gas, right? So if I make $100 an hour and gas is $10 per gallon, then I work like 10 minutes per gallon or whatever it might be. I don't know the math particularly. So, what I think is generally the highest level is what it seems like historically, and what I think is about right is 15 to 20 minutes of work per gallon of gasoline is where you level off before people start saying, I'm going to try and work from home, or I'm going to find a job that's closer, or I'm going to ride my bike. And so that I think is where the highest we'd really look at for a price is. Now, here's the big thing is if the whole world starts escalating to higher levels of per barrel oil, right? So we're looking at just the United States, but and we're driving those down by supplementing with our strategic reserves. If you look at the entire world, that price is still on a world expectation, right? So we might be suppressing it at home, but we can only do that so long. And from a retail perspective, if I can send oil, if I can sell it to Mexico for $190 a barrel, but people in the United States want $150 a barrel, well, I'm going to start selling it to Mexico. So as that whole oil price increases across the world, that increases prices here in the United States, even though we have a pipeline coming from Canada, and we could, in theory, convert oil manufacturing production into our refineries and whatnot. One last note is that gas, jet fuel, diesel is not the only thing that we get from oil or from refineries. We get things that go into plastics. We get things that lots of things that go into electronics, chips, memory. All of those things become something that people are paying higher for just because there's not oil, along with, just the added transportation costs of things. So that is our first topic. And if you want to stop there and not hear about DeepSeek, then an AI model that has some interesting stuff, then there you go. That's part one of today. All right, moving on to DeepSeek version 4. So, if you're not familiar with all the LLMs and GPTs, DeepSeek is probably the most notable, as in well known one in America from China. And that's because it was pretty much the first one to come out that was really like, oh, hey, look, China's AIs are doing something interesting and extremely less expensive from in comparison to all the other options. So, DeepSeek version 4 is changing a lot of the ways that costs for how we query an LLM, how we do what we would kind of think of as like searching in Google, asking it a question. So most companies have to run these massive computer workloads and clusters to go through and train their models. So a lot of that is reading all this data, and to some extent, it's kind of bankrupting some of these companies. And we might do this is a little preview. We might do one on Facebook and data. And there was kind of and I think it's a lawsuit now, but they essentially downloaded stuff from torrents and things that were private and used it to train their AI on. So when you send stuff to an LLM, there is like sending a prompt and getting an answer. So think of these like mailing a package, right? So when you go to OpenAI or ChatGPT, basically, it costs $5 to mail the package and $25 for them to ship it back. Now, these are broken down into what we would call tokens, and the token cost is usually built around a million. So you're spending $5 to ship a million things and $25 to get a million things back. Essentially, we're simplifying things. Gemini is $2 to send it and $12 to get it back. So DeepSeek in comparison, so Gemini is $2, OpenAI is 5. It costs 44 cents to send it and 87 cents to get the answer back. So it is essentially, if you had the models, the other ones for 4 months, you would get 7 years worth of DeepSeek, which comes up because recently Uber announced that, and I think we covered it in yesterday's episode. They announced something like they had 4 months of compute planned for spending, or excuse me, a year, and they used it up in 4 months. So they would have been able to get like 2 or 3 years out of it. So here's the kicker on this one: is this is kind of a geopolitic, here's the catch of it all. It's not just a technical victory, but it's also a scary global government one. If you're China, from a strategic military intelligence point of view, you want information from people anywhere. That's why TikTok was close to being banned and had all these concerns. Is it's a capability. It's not just that it exists; it's a capability that China had that we as America did not. We didn't have some way to put a bunch of microphones on a lot of smartphones in China, whereas they did at that point, right? And kind of there's some question as to if they still do. So everything and all the data you send to DeepSeek will help them build a stronger AI, fund more of their chip makers, and then accumulate more data. So there's a piece of this that gets even a little more technical. We're going to talk about why it's cheaper and what changes it kind of made. So what you're looking at a lot of times with LLMs is a token that 1 million tokens for $5, whatever it is, right? Like that's the package sending and coming back. Usually a token is considered to be one word, and it might be each syllable, and it could be, that just the word could take up multiple tokens because I say something like Chinese and it's looking into more information on that. And that's why sending data back can be more expensive. So normally you're reading a huge book and it clogs up the AI's brain. It's trying to memorize every single word, even in your question and answer. It's trying to do that. So what DeepSeek does is it's now using, they call it a medium distance tool, and it's squishing every group of 4 words into a quick summary and then indexes and searches that quicker. And then they're using more of a long term piece of it, very similar, but it condenses 128 words into a very small, tiny memory slot, which is basically a text message. So, hey, I love you is the 4 letter word for a 4 word in a text message. And then 128 is a tweet or a haiku on how I love you, right? And so AI gets this dirt cheap, fast global view of all these files. So, is it worth it? And DeepSeek's ultimate goal is to make more money so it can train a better AI and so it can beat out the other AIs and be a winner for China. Is it nice to have a subsidized system exchanged for those kind of costs? Like, hey, buy in America versus buy in China. My personal opinion is it's worth that saving lots of money. And the other thing I would say is DeepSeek is not shy about saying our model is worse than the current ones from Claude or Gemini. It's behind in those about 3 to 6 months. However, the way that they're doing this, they dropped a massive 53-page technical paper to explain what they're doing. It's going to be something that all of the major LLMs are looking at and trying to copy as rapidly as they can.